Romanian deadlifts are a great way for runners to isolate their glutes, hamstrings, and really work on the function of their posterior chain by breaking the deadlift down into just a single motion. So a standard deadlift, you're picking the weight up off the ground, and you are using a little bit of a leg press motion for the first half of it and a hip hinge for the second half. The Romanian deadlift distills that down, and we just work on the hip hinge in the top half of that movement. It's a great way to make sure that your glutes are active, that they're firing effectively, and that's really gonna add a lot of power into your running stride. It also helps with stabilization kind of through your low back, through your upper back, because it's a full body exercise. So it's a great way for runners to really work on the function of their posterior chain, which is super important for efficient and effective running. To set up for a Romanian deadlift, we're gonna set up the squat rack. With the Romanian deadlift, the one thing that's a little bit different than a standard deadlift is because we're just focusing on the top half of the motion, we don't wanna have to pick the weight up from the ground and set it back down on the ground. So you're gonna set up your hooks on the lowest setting on the outside of your squat rack, and that's gonna allow you to pick the weight up from a fairly upright position. So for me to grab this weight right here, I only have a slight bend in my back, and that's enough that when I stand up, the front of the bar is gonna clear those hooks. From here, all I need to do is put the weight on both sides, and I'm essentially ready to go. The last thing you wanna make sure that you do when you're doing a deadlift is you do wanna use your clips on the outside here. The reason that you wanna use those is that if for some reason you get a little bit off balance or something, you don't want the weight to slide off to one side. It can unbalance you, the weight can fall off, it could cause an injury, you could drop all the weight. So always make sure you have those clips on the outside just as an extra safety measure. But beyond that, once you've got everything racked up, you're ready to go. The key difference between the Romanian deadlift and a regular deadlift is what portion of the movement that you're working on. A regular deadlift, you're lifting from the floor. You have a leg press for the first half of that movement and a hip hinge for the second half. With the Romanian deadlift, we're just working on that hip hinge portion. So we're just starting from the weight being up high. We're lowering as far as we can with that hip hinge, and then we're hinging back up with a nice squeeze of our glutes once we get back up to the top. So what that's gonna look like is you're gonna set up on the bar, arms are gonna be about shoulder width apart, and feet are gonna be about hip width apart. So it's a fairly narrow stance. From there, you're gonna set your back. You want a nice kind of gradual curve of that low back, nice strong back, and you want your shoulder blades to be back. You don't wanna be hunched forward this way. That's gonna put all that stress from the weight through your back. So instead you wanna lift with everything being nice and solid. So shoulders are gonna be back and down. Again, curve through the back, and then I'm picking that bar up. So from here, I'm gonna pick that bar up, take a little bit of a step forward. I don't have to go very far. And then from here, this is my starting position. So my shoulders are back. I'm in this nice solid position. And then from here, as I hinge forwards, my butt is gonna go back, and then I'm going down until the bar gets to about my knees or so. So my butt is back nice and far. You can see I've still got that nice curve of the low back there. And from there, I'm coming all the way back up. So there isn't a whole lot of bending at the knee that happens. Everything is hinging from the hips. So I'm starting from here, lowering down to this point, and then I squeeze with my glutes, stand up, get a nice squeeze up at the top. Back down again, and up. And so by going through those different motions, I'm just working on that hinge portion. I'm not actually touching the weight to the ground. And then when I go to re-rack, all I have to do is take a little step back and rack it back up. You can also do this, the same thing, from outside the cage. You can take a step backwards, do your deadlifts that way, and then you can step forwards to re-rack it. It's just a matter of personal preference. To adjust your difficulty, you're gonna increase your weight by 5 to 10 pounds on each side. And so what you wanna remember is that this is a lift where you've got weight on both sides of the bar. If you increase by 5 pounds on each side, that's an increase of 10 pounds total. So if you're feeling like you're close to your limit, but you do wanna increase, going up by that 5 pounds is gonna be perfect. If you feel like you've still got some room to increase, then you can go up by 10 pounds on each side. Two common problem areas with the Romanian deadlift for a lot of runners are gonna be number one, not having the hamstring mobility to go through a very large range of motion, and number two, not being able to maintain a nice solid curve to that low back. So we'll take a look at a couple of modifications and exercises that you can do to improve your function here. So if you are finding it hard to maintain that low back, if you find that it's starting to arch forwards while you do this exercise, a great way to work on this is with some dumbbell good mornings. So the way you're gonna set up for these is you're gonna set yourself up, essentially put that weight like you have a bar on your back, and you're locking those shoulders in place. From here, you're gonna do the exact same motion as if you were doing those Romanian deadlifts, but not having the heavy weight that you would actually use when you're deadlifting. So you've got your dumbbells here, you're gonna move yourself forwards as far as you can, and then stand back up. Same thing, and again. So what you're working on here is activating the shoulders, activating all those stabilizer muscles through your spine, and it's really gonna make sure that you're able to effectively move that weight when you go do your Romanian deadlifts. The other thing that you might find is your hamstrings might limit your mobility and how far you can actually go down. Runners have notoriously tight hamstrings, and so this is something that a lot of people are just gonna need to slowly work on and improve over time. The beauty with the Romanian deadlift is because we're not bending all the way down to pick that weight up off the floor. You can start with the weight wherever you want, and you can slowly work over time to get a larger range of motion and be able to go a little bit deeper. So even when you're getting started, if you're only going to maybe 45 degrees and that's as far as you can go, just make sure that you're maintaining proper form. Don't worry about how low you can lower the weight. Just maintain that low back positioning and make sure that you're not overdoing it, overstretching your hamstrings or using bad form to try and go a little bit lower. If you don't have access to a squat rack like this or heavier weights to be able to do a Romanian deadlift like this, the best substitution is to do a glute bridge. And so that would be either a single or double leg glute bridge. And you can also take some weight, add it onto that glute bridge. So that might be taking a dumbbell, a kettlebell, or maybe a weight plate, setting it on top of your hips and doing a glute bridge from the floor. It's gonna be a similar amount of activation. You're gonna be activating similar muscles. It's just a little bit different way of doing the same type of movement.